What does Pan-Africanism mean to you?
For me, Pan-Africanism is very complicated things. So basically, I made a transition from an idea of Pan-Africanism that was based only on being black descent around the world or in Africa, and that's it, to a more concrete idea that is build business together, and especially in Africa. And when I say business, I say everything, and I say basically try to move the money into the Black African community or into Africa space.
All right, you guys, let's get into first.
There is a movement promoting our stories, and many of us grew up with a strong craving for images we can relate to. Production teams, writers, creative heads have come together to tell stories, and this podcast is their voice. The themes covered are very relevant to the Black community, and anyone concerned by the social and racial injustices that are in place to stifle this voice. The Pan-African voice is not easily heard, and here we talk about our movies, that film or doc which you heard about but didn't get to see. What was the story? Where can I watch it? It now has a voice. Tune in. We walk you through these stories and interview the filmmakers. Welcome. Karibu sana. Karibu sana.
And starting right on the lens. Ready? And action.
Welcome to everyone. This is another episode of the Pan-African Film Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about BlaxploItalian with Fred Kuwornu, who we have here. And BlaxploItalian is a documentary tracing 100-year evolution of Black presence in Italian cinema. The director, Fred Kuwornu, is consumed by the lack of representation of Afro-Italians on screen. And then also, as he digs further into that, the exoticism, stereotyping, dehumanizing nature of the few roles that he uncovers is available in Italian cinema over the years. It was released in 2016, and it's a really important and beautiful research which taps into the very real, yet previously untold struggles faced by African American, Afro-Latino, and Afro-Italian actors and filmmakers. So some of the themes we're going to talk about, Fred, is, really heavy subjects like identity, the socio-political history of Italian cinema, representation, and just Black culture globally, right? And I just want to welcome you to our podcast. To give everyone a little brief background, Fred is a filmmaker, activist, producer, and an educator. He is also the first Italian of African descent to become a director, which is amazing. His personal story is fascinating and transcends several borders, from Bologna to now New York City.
Yeah.
Tell us more, Fred.
So first of all, thank you so much, Anna, to having me, because this podcast is really vibrant and important for all of those who want to work inside, I want to say, not only entertainment, but documentary and film industry, and by the way, also inside the global Black diaspora culture. So I hope that also my experience can contribute to support other projects or other ideas. Basically, I began this career by chance. So it's not something that when I was a kid, I wanted to become a documentary filmmaker, or I want to struggle also how to fund my film. And basically, when I was a teenager in Italy, and we are talking about the late 80s, I think that I was really attracted by the music industry. In particular, I was working as a DJ, and actually I worked as a DJ for 15 years since I was 16 years old. And only now I discovered that basically maybe working in a radio and of course playing songs and music allowed me to first of all doing something that was fun, but also to connect me with a part of my Blackness, because when I was born and raised in Italy, there were a few spaces in which there were African descent. And actually, few people of African descent were in my inner circle. One was my dad, that he came from Ghana in 1965 to Italy to study medicine. And I remember that when I was young, there were a couple of kids of my age, born in Bologna, North Italy, with the same background. So their dads were African, who were students and then at the time were doctors, and their Italian moms. So I remember only this kind of encounter when I was really young about people who look like me. So basically music, when I discovered that there was, how can I say, something that was unconscious, but I was really attracted by Black music at the time. So everything that has been produced by Black music. So for this reason, I want to become a DJ. And when I was a DJ, basically was the moment in which we are talking about the late 80s, early 90s. You have to consider that in Italy, there is always a delay of everything. But in the early 90s, there was the raising of the rap and hip-hop music. And for me, it was something that was unbelievable. And so these were a couple of things that basically supported my will to, in one sense, encounter the Black culture through the music and, of course, having a profession that was connected to that. So basically, until 35 years old, even I attended and graduated at the University of Bologna in political science. Basically, I was considering my career inside the radio. And basically, I wanted to reach the national radio because I was working in local radio of the region Emilia-Romagna and Veneto. But again, there was something that came into my life. And basically, when I was 35 years old, I started to work as a television writer for the public television. It was not a great experience, but it was the experience that for me was really important because I understood that I really loved to work behind the scene and not as a host, not as an actor. Even I made a couple of films as an actor. But I was really enjoying the idea to create, to organize, to produce, and to tell different stories. And so basically, after 4 years of this experience, I was contacted by a friend who told me, Fred, Spike Lee is coming to Italy because he wants to do a film about African-American soldiers in World War II in Italy. And so at the time, I remember that I made all the efforts to enter in contact with Spike, and I was able, through a brilliant idea, to contact his first assistant director that was in Italy for doing scouting location. And so basically, when I understood where Spike was living in Italy for doing the scouting location, I sent him a letter, an introduction letter, and I asked if there was some position available for the film because I was based in Italy and blah, blah, blah. And I was really lucky because after 3 days, I got an answer and I met Spike Lee in Cinecittà Studios. And basically, when I was there, the director of the photography offered me a role of stand-in for the entire production of the film that were 5 months. So it was great also for the money. And this allowed me also to work as a production assistant at the end of the production of the film. And also I worked for 3 weeks as an extra. And the great experience and the great connection was not, of course, meeting Spike Lee. Even he was for me an idol since I was in the high school, because when he released Do the Right Thing, this film was really powerful and was completing this idea of Blackness that until the release of the film, I got only through the music. Do the Right Thing was basically, for me, a great encyclopedia of Black culture of the 80s, because it was not only the plot of the film, there was a great music, the great soundtrack, there was a great streetwear. Streetwear was becoming really mainstream at the time. So for me, this film, being an isolated African descent in Italy, but also this film was really powerful in Europe, was really important for a lot of people who were African descent. So the great opportunity was not for me meeting Spike Lee, was understanding at the time, I understood that, I participated in this great film, And I really love this story. And I want to do something more because I don't want to go back to work for the television. And basically, this was the time that came the idea to realize my first documentary, Inside Buffalo. Inside Buffalo is a documentary in which I interviewed the real African-American veterans who fought for America in Italy during World War II. And all this documentary, of course, has been made in English. The research for the documentary were in English and blah, blah, blah. And Inside Buffalo is a documentary that basically tells the story of the 92nd Infantry Division, nicknamed Buffalo Soldiers. This division fought in Tuscany during World War II. I interviewed more than 11 veterans at the time, and was a great experience also because I got the opportunity to personally knowing veterans. At the time, they were 85 years old until 92 years old. And during the production of this documentary, also, I understood that they were not only World War II veterans, because when they were in World War II, they were 19 or 20 years old, but they were the backbone of the civil rights movement. During the civil rights movement, they were adults with families, were people, by the way, trained to difficulties, were people who discovered things abroad in the United States, so they were more open-minded. So this documentary for me was really relevant because there are two reasons, and now I can reconnect also with BlaxploItalian. Few of the first images of blackness that I've seen in Italian film were in neo-realist film where there were African-American soldiers. Other images, public images about African descent that I've seen in Italy when I was maybe 12 or 13 years old were from sport, in particular from football, and in particular from Brazil, when, for example, the Brazilian national team in the World FIFA Championship had Afro-Brazilian players. So basically, until the end of the 80s, was really difficult to find in the Italian television black actors. Even in American production, because there was always this delay in Italy about broadcasting American television show. And so you have to consider that also in America, until maybe the late 70s, there were not a lot of African-American actors in many TV shows. So basically, in the 80s, Italy was still broadcasting the 70s production of United States. And in the mid-80s, they were definitely starting to broadcasting the early 80s production of United States, in which there were a lot of African Americans. And, this was also the time of the emerging shows and very popular, like Bill Cosby show and other shows. So this was basically my second impact into a view of blackness in Italy, but always was not a blackness of Afro-Italians, was constantly a blackness who were coming from abroad, so from South America and from United States. So after Inside Buffalo, maybe after 8 years, I discovered two important things. One was this beautiful book called, in Italian is A Story of Post-Colonial, written by an Italian scholar. This book was really interesting because it was basically including a huge list of films in which there were African descent actors. And so it was a great tool for me to do a research. And the other things was a documentary called, sorry for my Portuguese, but the documentary is called A Negação do Brasil, o Negro na Telenovela Brasileira. Basically, it's a documentary directed by an Afro-Brazilian director. His name is Joel Araujo. Joel, a lot of years ago, made this documentary about how Afro-Brazilians are represented in the telenovela. Telenovelas in Brazil are one of the most popular genre. And I was really surprised because, Brazil is a place where maybe the 50% of the population is African descent or mixed race. But at the time, in the telenovelas, the space and the representation was really limited. We are talking about 1 or 2%, and in most cases with a lot of stereotypes. And so the two things came together, the book and the documentary, and I say, okay, I would like to do a documentary about the presence of African actors in the Italian cinema, because Italian cinema, by the way, now is not really popular, but many decades ago, we are talking about during the silent mute era, but also during the 40s and 50s, was one of the most global important industry in the world. And in those films also there were Africans. The idea of BlaxploItalian was an idea to create a documentary which was touring different communities in Italy and abroad Italy, a documentary which was touring with the screenings, of course, of the documentary, also the film industries of different countries. So we made a lot of events organized by associations that were connected with the film industry or the casting directors. And when I started to do BlaxploItalian was 2014. When BlaxploItalian was ready was the end of 2015. But this was a great momentum, not only in Italy, but especially in the United States, about the conversation of representation of diversity in the film industry, because in the early 2016, there were the controversial story of Oscar So White, and there were other movements. So the interest of and how Black were represented in American film industry became huge at the time. And so for me, even BlaxploItalian is an Italian documentary-based film. We had some chapter about what was going on also in the United States and UK and blah, blah, blah. So in one sense, the documentary became really relevant for also American audience, British audience, and other audience in the world, not only Italy. And for this reason, we made a lot of screenings around South Africa, North America, Brazil, where I spent 4 weeks, Netherlands, France, UK, and also other country like South Africa, Ghana, and Kenya. So it was really interesting bringing this conversation. And sometimes was really interesting, how can I say, detach the story of BlaxploItalian, because the issue of representation is an issue that is much more wider. So it's not only an ethnicity issues, but there are, by the way, other ethnicities like Asian descent, South American descent, who are really not represented in many film industries. But sometimes in many, by the way, local film industry with few ethnicities like Ghana, in which the 95% of the population is Ghanaian, is Black Ghanaian. Even there are right now also in Ghana 5% that are sons of immigrants from different parts of the world. But also in Ghana and in many other countries, there is always a lack of representation. Sometimes it's a lack of representation of the different tribes who are forming a country. Sometimes it's not a lack of representation, but is a representation of stereotypes of different groups of the society. And so again, there is something that is always missed in many film industry of the world. So this important side of BlaxploItalian to trigger a conversation about diversity, representation, and stereotypes for me was really great and actually opened me the door to do a lot of different things. This was also a documentary that opens me the idea to be much more involved into the film industry. In 1915, over 100 years ago, a black actor appeared for the first time in an Italian movie, Domenico Gaido's film Salammbô. This actor, however, was not acknowledged in the film credits. A few days before the 2016 Oscars, a hashtag called Oscar So White gained momentum with a video Jada Pinkett Smith posted on social media. Her husband and other black celebrities soon responded to her statement, criticizing not only the exclusion of African Americans from the nomination, but the entire film industry, in which people of color are underrepresented as producers, writers, or Academy members.
In July 2016, I met Cheryl Bon-Isaacs, the president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, who recently appointed 683 new members of the Academy.
Diversity in the modern world is more than just a skin colour. It's a gender, age, disability, sexual orientation, social background, and most importantly, in my opinion, it's diversity of thought.
Yeah, like would you say that when you started off, you wanted to tell that story, you were more inspired about what you were not seeing in terms of representation, but as you got going, you found that the documentary had this impact on propagating diversity into the media industry globally, I guess because of timing and because of everything, as you said, like in terms of the global momentum on advancing diversity in the industry and as well advancing your presence as an activist, right? Not only for more representation on Italian screens, but the struggle for more visibility and representation in the entertainment industry at large. Was that like how the journey transitioned rather than you setting off to do that from the beginning?
No, this was a journey transition. Basically, journey transition is a part of my story and the story of my parents too, because I understood that my parents migrated in another continent, that is Europe. I was born and raised in Europe, but me too, I migrated in another continent, and maybe the rest part of my life, I want to migrate again in Ghana. So maybe I will do, and basically I will close the cycle of made by my dad. So life is very unpredictable if you are curious and if you want to. But professionally, I got a lot of transitions. So basically, BlaxploItalian, it's also a transition from being a pure filmmaker who is committed maybe to do a documentary and is trying to do a documentary that maybe he think it could be a success. So he pick also a topic and then he tries simply to do film festival and selling maybe to some television. BlaxploItalian for me was a transition because it was an hybrid documentary that I can use for doing community screening. I use it for doing education. So a lot of university and college showed BlaxploItalian. It was also for me a transition because I became an active speaker. So since I realized BlaxploItalian, maybe just only with BlaxploItalian, I generated more than 400 talks in different locations, university, college, and he opened me the idea also to be more active in a professional way, not only as an activist, but to create solution. And so last year, not because I took maybe 7 years after the release of BlaxploItalian, but just because now the time are great to have a production made by Black Italian directors. Last year, I launched a series called the Black Italian Film Showcase. Is a series made with short film, feature films, and documentaries directed by Afro-Italians director. Because for me is also a concrete solution to increase visibility, to connect and create networking, to mentor other Afro-Italian directors, to give them a space. So a lot of things are, for me, always changing. When I made also BlaxploItalian, I was really engaged in a lot of talks. I understood that basically people were interested. I understood that there was an interest also for a local topic if they talk global. So every this is very important for me as a lesson, also as a filmmaker. Every local topic could be potentially really important in the world. In particular, if you are able to connect with a real deep story. It doesn't matter if it's too personal. Actually, I'm working also to develop a project about my dad. And for me, it's strange because when I talk about my projects around, and usually I have 2-3 different projects that I'm developing, the project about my dad, I underestimate because I say this is personal. It's my dad who want to care about my dad. I didn't care for a lot about the potential and the power story of my dad. So why the other And believe me, is the project that all the people say, no, you have to do that. You have
Yeah.
to that.
I was just going to say, sometimes when it hits closer to home, it's actually what's most attractive because of how personal it is. It tends to
and you know what? We are so sometimes engaged in our profession, and we are
an appearing professional.
Yeah, we really underappreciate our family, and and for me, for example, this works a lot because when I understood that people appreciate the story of my dad, I start to appreciate much more the real story of my dad and my dad too, because I say, oh, this guy, he was 19 when he left Ghana. He needed to learn a new language, and he studied medicine. So, by the way, he made a lot. He became doctor, he raised a family, he struggled a lot for a lot of things, and he was not alone. A lot of people and young students of his age and from Ghana and different countries of Africa had the same experience in Europe at the time. So we are not a couple of people, but they are a lot of people. And being a migrant, it's a universal condition of the human being right now. A lot of people are doing the same experience. So I think that the stories like that can inspire a lot of people. So for this reason, I made a lot of transition in different fields. And another one is the education, because after I was basically engaged in more than 300 colleges, I understood that I got... not as Fred Kuwornu, but as a topic that I'm bringing into the university. There was a community that was really interested in, especially in Black Italians culture and story. And
could you tell me a little more about, like, as you're speaking about your speaking career, what it actually means to you to be an educator now?
My speaking career was it's a great career because first of all allows me to learn being paid, because I have the great opportunity to travel in a lot of college, to meet a lot of scholars, professor. Okay, I'm going there to give a talk, but after the talk there is always a moment of talk with other scholars, or you go to dinner. And a lot of my ideas and a lot of my research came from the interaction with scholars. And this is very important because especially right now that we can use social media, we can create projects and products that can be more hybrid and can mix the academic scholar, or by the way, the knowledge with the appeal to entertain people with stories, and also they can really spread much more than an academic book that is very difficult that 20 years old, but also me, read the academic book, but through a video, through a short doc series, through this kind of product, maybe, first of all, I learn something, and secondly, if I want to explore much more, I can have some reference. So for me, it was really important. I'm very grateful to have this great opportunity because, and also I'm a connector. So when I understood that I was a connector of knowledge, because, okay, I was in DC at our university and I learned this story from this professor. And then maybe after 5 months, I'm in another university and there is a professor who is trying to investigate something. And I say, look, there is your colleague in DC that is doing that. So this is very interesting. And also for me, it was great because 2 years ago, so I launched a course online called Teaching Black Italy. This is a course for a professor of Italian studies and Black studies. It's a professional development course in which basically in 1 week they have the knowledge how they can start to teach a course about Black Italy, or how they can diversify the current course, incorporating elements of Black Italy. So if you are teaching a course about gender in Italy, by the way, you can incorporate a lot of things about the Black women experience in Italy into this course.
That's amazing and very true, like how much more media is becoming an educator. Definitely a big crossover there. The way the youth is using media is just undeniable. But I just want to bring it back to what you were talking about earlier. in terms of the web series you founded, Black IT, Black Kid, and just the importance of passing it on, right? Especially within the Italian political context, even currently. I don't know if you want to go there, but can you tell us more about like what motivated you to found that series, which is a lot more recent, kind of 2020, right?
Yeah, the series was motivated again by the academia, because when I was doing the speaker, maybe the 45-50% of the department which invite me were Italian Studies department. And I noticed that there was a lack of teaching when they were teaching about blackness in Italy, because they were constantly teaching, and it's okay, but they were only focusing on migrant experience, recent migrant experience, and in particular refugee. And I say, wait a minute, when you are teaching Neapolitan, Naples is in the south and is a city with a lot of problematic situation, like also crime organization, blah, blah, blah. But I was saying to them, wait, when you are teaching Neapolitan culture or history, you are not only teaching or showing a crime organization and poor people. You are teaching the richness of the presence of, and it's like the African descent presence in Italy is not just a presence of people who came in the last 15 years as an immigrant from desperate or there are second generation born and raised there. There are wealthy Africans who simply moved there. There are people who are not from Africa, but are from United States, like African American, or there are Black Brazilian. There are, so it's not a monolithic experience. So the idea was, okay, I can't, how can I say, I can't try to make a change simply talk with professor and blah, 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 because it's a waste of time. But they need to see something different. So when people will start to see a lot of things different, maybe there are stimulate to also. So for this reason, I say, okay, I want to realize a short series in which personally I went to interview people. So this was a real low budget work. Basically, I made everything. I made the interview, the video interview, audio, lights, and editing. And actually, I think that I publish only 12 or 13 stories. Even I interview 40 person. Now it's too late, I think, to publish the rest of the stories, because some of the person that I interviewed, they became really popular in Italy. And so if I show a video of 6-7 years ago, it's not like, but the idea was to stimulate a different representation. And also was also to, this is another, I think, a topic of fight. And when I say digital activism, I refer personally to this, because still now it's very difficult to fight the algorithm. You can fight a lot of things, but to fight the algorithm, you have to increase content and you have to increase also the CEO of this content. Otherwise, still now in Italy, but it's the same in America. In Italy, if you type on Google the word migrant and you go to Google Images, you will see 90% of the images are only African on the boat on the Mediterranean Sea. This is what for the algorithms means the word migrant. And for me, it's something that scared me a lot because, first of all, it's something that can risk to demonize the word migrant. Even a Finland guy who is in Italy is a migrant. So it's not, first of all, migrants are not only African. Even Google Italy show you the 90% are African on board. And secondly, even our African are not only African by boat, because black people came in different...
Right. That's so interesting. Like, how do you fight the algorithm? That's very unique.
It came just for curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And then, believe me, I made the same experiment in different language. It was the same. So if you do in the United States and you type migrants, you will see a lot of Mexican American who are coming from border.
Yeah. That's
not students and not. If you do in France, again, there is a black imaging of
a lot of black.
Africans. But I imagine that it works in different parts of the world the same.
I'm sure. And just for the audience who might not yet have explored your website or your web series, Black IT, and it's spelled BLAQIT. It's basically a presentation of a different side to these so-called migrants, and showing that there are successful, very, very inspirational careers by migrants or immigrants, Afro descent. And that's super interesting. But I did want to tell you, like, even if you have older, interviews of people whose lives has changed, I think it would still be interesting to release them. I think it gives it authenticity to see how far they've come.
Yeah, maybe I should ask to the people that I interview
authorization.
Yeah, because
I have to release them.
And maybe we can create a sort of different format, giving the idea that how they were before became popular.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into the next question I had for you, which is the fact that I've seen you, and it's a fact that you help to mentor, influence across your career, and in some cases launch other careers for upcoming and currently well-established filmmakers such as Antonio Di Chele Di Stefano, who's the writer of the Netflix series Zero. And how does that aspect of your work feel for you?
I'm trying, to support and mentor, maybe to support, because in Italy, I don't know why, but people, they don't like to be mentoring.
I think the concept of mentorship, especially, well, for me anyway, having migrated via Europe from Africa to the States, is really different in Europe. I personally found it's just not as developed and structured as the concept is here in the US. And I think
I think that in US, I'm honest, they see also as a privilege if you have the opportunity to be mentored by someone who in his career made a lot of mistakes. And basically mentorship, I think, is just like also African proverb and structure of the society, is just telling you that you can sometimes skip some mistakes. It's just...
I agree. I don't know if you would agree, but I find that there's a bit more value placed on experiential learning here in the US. Yeah. I think there's a lot more value on just book knowledge in Europe and certification rather than I shadowed this person, I was mentored by this person, actually has some credibility and here as opposed to Europe. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I'm totally agree. And in Italy also, I think that it's difficult because usually people also, they prefer shortcuts by a mentor. So just, I need this contact. This is...
That's what mentorship is. It's the hookup. It's just the plug.
But they don't understand that if I give this contact is because I made a lot of steps in my life and mistakes. And maybe it's much more important to you to learn this experience. Right. And then it will be much more easy to you to reach every content that you want. So this is, for me, a problematic thing because maybe in the last 3-4 years, it's very difficult that I really support people because in some cases is a total waste of time. And the only real... There are a couple of artists. One is Antonio that I always, even when we were disagreeing about a lot of things, I always supported Antonio. And actually for me, when he made the series of Netflix was also a sort of a victory because I supported him in different way. And I remember that also when I gave my class or lecture in the university, I always say, this guy, because this guy will be really important in the future. And so actually right now we are also considering to open a company together in Italy. So this is it's a great for me achievement, not for me, for both. I think is something that is but the mindset of Antonio, it's I think it's a question of mindset. So if there is a young or not young talent person who want to want to become more productive, if we have the same mindset, for me, it's not difficult to.
It only works if the mindsets are kind of aligned. Otherwise, I just also wanted to circle back around to how far your roots have spread and the fact that you're going to almost circle back now in your migration to Ghana, and to understand within that context, what does Pan-Africanism mean to you?
For me, Pan-Africanism, it's very complicated things. So basically, I made a transition from an idea of Pan-Africanism that was based only on being Black descent around the world or in Africa, and that's it, to a more concrete idea that is build business together, and especially in Africa. And when I say business, I say everything, and I say basically try to move the money into the Black African community or into Africa space. It doesn't matter if this money are not managed by Chinese, American, or who are living, but try to create this opportunity, because only when a country or an ethnicity is powerful, also the other people of this ethnicity who are living abroad are, by the way, shining from this power. And for each single African descent who are abroad Africa, is impossible to create a real economic condition that is relevant for the other communities. In the Caribbean is impossible, in Brazil is impossible, United States only maybe the 10% of African Americans has wealth, but and by the way, they are spending his wealth into other ethnicity, corporation, and blah, blah, blah. And in Europe, I think it will be much more difficult, maybe much more than US, because I don't think the generation of Antonio or this young generation could have some opportunities, even also because Europe, by the way, the economy is totally decreasing and Europe has not physical resources. So if we want to fight and we want to be unified in this idea, we need to change a little bit our mindset. That is not just the sense of community and belonging, but is the sense to do community and belonging with real concrete tools.
Right. So to take it back to the foundation of Pan-Africanism as a concept based on the economics, the resources, and the
and also the space, because how can I say, even you are an African American, there are some kind of markets that are allowed to you in US, and maybe they will not destroy you if you open a small business. But when you want to start a huge idea, because you have a huge idea that can be expanded, at a certain point, you will not have any option here in US or in Canada or in Europe. So why you don't invest this huge idea that you have in Africa? And that's it. You have a lot of market, a lot of things that are available. And so you can do your money, but you can also create benefits for Africans.
Yeah, and a growing market too, right? Really fast.
No, it's a growing market. So if we watch in an analytical way and economic way, it's the growing market. And in fact, many other countries understand that, and they are trying to do all the kind of efforts that are possible to do that.
Yeah. Do you have any future plans or projects in the pipeline which you'd like to share? And also let the audience know where they can watch BlaxploItalian.
I have a project that is basically in the line of BlaxploItalian, but also is connected to my current work, that is connected to the African presence in Renaissance in Europe. And hopefully this will be the first chapter of a trilogy, a documentary trilogy, that is about the African presence in Europe in different time of the history. And I want to start with the Renaissance, because Renaissance is always celebrated, is really well known in many countries. And there are a lot of paintings, monuments, texts in which this presence has been portrayed or told. You have to consider that in Lisbon, for example, but also in Seville, Grenada, the 10% of the population was African at the time, during the 15th century. So this is for me an important project because there are a lot of misunderstanding about history in Europe, and also is an important also story to demark what was the concept of a slave and African slave, because until the Renaissance and maybe until the 16th century, African, actually the 70% of African were not slaves, even they were in Europe, so they were...
Different context.
Yeah.
Where can they find, and where can our audience find BlaxploItalian if they wanted to watch the documentary?
Oh, BlaxploItalian, I think is only on Vimeo, because at this moment, still now, we have a great request from universities. So usually we use only the educational price that was really high for. But I think that we will put, there is in Vimeo an option to purchase for maybe $2-3.
And also, if you are an educator or promoting diversity in your institutions, corporations, educational places of study, they can reach out to you, right? And show the film that way, right?
Yeah.
Definitely still remains an educational tool. Yeah, so just to wrap up, any personal fun fact or any kind of social media pages or anything you want to talk about? I'm just really grateful for your time.
Yeah, there are just a couple of pages that you can visit. One is called blackitalia.info, and the other pages, and maybe you will be very helpful, is the blackitalianfilmshowcase.com. Because even is a very recent project, I'm sure that this project will grow in the next years. Because, of course, in the next year, we will have much more production made by Afro-Italian filmmakers. And so we have a lot of great ideas to expand this series. This year was the first year, so we made 3 cities, Chicago, Detroit, and San Francisco. But this showcase will be a nomadic showcase, so not only North America, when we will have the opportunity to subtitle a lot of films, and we will do in Brazil, of course, Europe, and of course Africa, and Asia if they would like to host us. But it's a great way, and it's a great tool of aggregator of different things.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much, Fred.
Thank you, Anna. No, thank you so much.
And another one. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Pan-African Film Podcast. We are now on Spotify and Instagram. Just search Pan-African Film Podcast to follow and like us there. Our new platform is 360 Africa. That's 360 Africa. And we want to thank our Kenyan Vibe partners. Shout out to the KV Squad. Last but not least, we thank our editor Ace. Please send us your feedback, like, follow, and comment.